The main objectives of this CPD is to open up the conversation on what is usually kept private, but greatly impacting on the profession. We also hope to have an all-inclusive discussion that will not victimize bosses nor the employees, bearing in mind that the GIA does not have a one size suit to fit all. We also hope to discuss or shed light on good ethical conduct for professional practice. Some of the issues bordering on confidentiality, etc., of jobs that are done in the office. We architects would also keenly follow on the outcome of this program. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our resource persons in the name of architect SM Kote and architect Tony Asari. And the subject is the architect's employer and the architect employee. So we'll be going into the role of the architect as an employee and the role of the architect as an employer, and also the GIA mandate. So we will be having SM and Tony taking us through. As you already know, these are fine gentlemen and the torchbearers of sound architectural practice. They wouldn't need any introduction because we all know them, but it will be great to hear a word or two from them. So I think architect Tony Asari, you may take the floor and introduce yourself with your brief remarks before we get into the crux of our matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Architect Fifi, and good afternoon, fellow architects. I hope I'm audible enough. This year, by September this year, I would have practiced for 24 years since we got out of school, and I did a bit of internship during my year out at the Teamwork Design Service, which had the principal architect as architect Kenneth Ampechum, who is a past president of the Ghana Institute of Architects. And then I went back to school for postgraduate studies and got back to Teamwork Design Service. Then I left Teamwork Design Service around 2002, 2003, thereabouts. And then around 2005, I started my firm, Tecton Consults, which is based in Kanda. Between then and now, I managed to squeeze some time to do a degree in urban planning and infrastructure management at the Human Settlement Management Institute in Delhi, India. And that has sharpened my thinking when it comes to urban design, urban infrastructure management. I have a blog that I write for some of us who read about what I write. It's called gongonbita.com, where I vent and I talk about architecture and urban planning. I'm married with 3 kids. My first daughter is in 4th year architecture. Thank you.
Good one. Okay, nice one. It's great to know that management. Well, that's something to take on. Do we have architect SM Kote online? Hello. Okay, right. Looks like he's not joined in yet, but I think we also have a few words to share with us. So as you can, our resource person, Tony Asari, has been through the mill from a student to a probationer to a young architect and now a principal architect. So for this presentation, he'll be sharing with us his experience and solutions he's found on his way up to where he has gotten now. we're supposed to hear a word or two from Architect SM Korte before we proceed to do a presentation by Tony Asari, which will be the basis of our discussion today. We intend to do a quick presentation so we have more time for interactions. We don't want this one to be a sit down and listen kind of program. So I believe with time fast spent, we shall allow Architect Tony to make the presentation. When SM comes, we'll let him have his take on it. Okay. Thank you, Tony. So please take the board.
Thank you very much. Can I share my file?
Yes, please. Yes, so you may share your screen, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, so can you please read the screen what I have?
Your screen is not up yet, but I think we have SM Korte on. So
yes, okay, I've uploaded.
Yes, so I think we'll take his initial remarks. So, Mr. President, we just got to you, so you are just on time to introduce yourself and have a brief remark before we proceed to the presentation.
Right. So thank you very much, Fifi, our host, and then thank you, fellow architects, for this opportunity. As I heard you say in your introduction, this is a conversation that has been long awaited. In the years past, we've had these conversations in the quiet of our own mates, in our rooms, in our offices, in the absence of our bosses. We've had these conversations. Now, as I became a boss, I also find out that whenever I meet with my colleagues' bosses, we also will sit down and have these conversations. Now, during my tenure as president, it's such a joy to have an opportunity to bring this conversation to the light. Employers, employees. As Tony mentioned, for me, though, I've been out of school for over 26 years, out of school. When I finished school, immediately I was a teaching assistant, and then I also worked with an Info Design Associates, may his soul rest in peace, in Kumasi for a year. After which I joined RICAD. I worked with RICAD for about 3 years. It was where I got my first introduction to the use of computers. A very profitable experience indeed it was for me. But by the time I was leaving RICAD, I was a young, frustrated architect. I was kind of confused about what the future held for me. I resigned from RICAD, and actually I felt I was not ready to work with any firm per se. So I sat home for a year, almost doing anything, kind of lost for direction. And then came an opportunity to work with Duega. Duega then and still is one of the biggest architectural houses, very great reputation it holds. I worked under the great architect Hein Grota and then Adote Brown were my bosses then. I worked with them for another 5 years. In my 10th year after school, though, I felt that it's time that I start to look at directions on my own. I sat home again for about a year contemplating and looking at how this was going to start, and then started Atelier. So that's been my journey, and we've been here as Atelier for the last 16 years or so and practicing. Today it gives me a joy to speak as a person who has been an employee for 10 years and has been a boss for 16 years. Experience in both fronts and ready to share. Thank you very much, Fifi.
Oh, great, great. So clearly, both of our resource persons have been down there. They have tasted what is down there and are tasting what is up there. We are getting a lot of comments now that they would want a younger one to speak. So we would have that when it's time for the question time. But for now, we'll have our resource persons lay the background. And then when we get to the questions time, we would open up for the younger architects to share their experiences on the same subject matter. So I think we'll continue by having the presentation from architect Tony Asari. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Vivi, I don't know whether my screen is up.
Unfortunately not.
Because I have it, I've shared my screen. Let me attempt doing that again.
Okay, when you go to share, make a screen. Okay, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I'm on, right?
Yes, you're on.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I have 20 minutes. I'll try and stay within my time. Good afternoon again, fellow architects. When I was told to consider this, I think the first image that came to my mind was cartoons that my kids used to watch, Despicable Me and his Minions, and the description of a very mean boss who has um, you know workers who are doing all sorts of things, but I mean to the ulterior motive of the boss. And for those who know this cartoon or animation, I mean the lead character was thinking of even trying to capture the moon and bringing it down and all sorts of things. Now, as architects, and as young people, when we meet the kinds of words that we use in describing our bosses, I mean, I don't know whether we can call them hateful or reprehensible or awful or repulsive, but I mean, we may have even gone as far as describing our bosses that way because we think that they're mean, they don't actually feel the way we feel, and it takes too long to get wherever. And sometimes you don't even feel appreciated. And I think I've been there too many times, and I've voiced myself my feelings so many times. In 2002, I wrote an article that was published in the Architecture magazine. I think then we had the architect Maxwell Mensah-Clottey as editor. And I wrote an article, A Decade of Footmanship. And so when this issue came up, I decided that I'll go back and look at what I wrote as a young architect. And it's a very good reference point. This was written in November 2002. And I have asked myself whether anything has changed ever since that time. What has changed is that I've moved from an architect employee to an architect employer. Are things better? Have I been a better principal architect? I think we would all have to possibly listen to our young architects and see whether we've been better architects. For myself, I would wish that I could get maybe one or two of my staff who I've worked with to be able to come and talk about it, because I personally believe that we need to dialogue this issue quite well. And then at what cost has the effort been to running my firm in trying to be a good boss? And that is the biggest issue that most bosses meet and talk about as to what is holding us back from growing. Now, I decided to get some quotations that I wrote in the article. I read them and I really smile that, well, did I really write this? I remember that in the dialogue of what the then ARC and the GIA and our principals, the way they were treating us, I mentioned that one of my quotations is that if the shadow of a tree is bent, straighten the tree and not the shadow. And this just talked about my frustrations that there was a structural deformity that we shouldn't window dress it. And then I felt then that we were not dialoguing enough when it comes to salaries of workers, our conditions of service, personal growth, working environment, and all that. And then I felt that the senior architects were basically treating us the rest of the earth, and as poor people, poor young architects. Then I read a book authored by Carl Zweiby and Tom Lloyd, Then that talked about managing know-how, and it basically talked about how you manage firms like lawyers and architects. And one of the remarkable statements that he said was that if you work in an office for 5 years and as a professional, maybe post GIA, BPA examination and all that, and you don't attain partnership, then you are labeled as a veteran in the office. I look at myself now and I ask whether I have my staff graduating to become partners. And the answer is no. Why are they not partners? I think these are some of the questions that we need to ask, because it costs time, money, expertise, and to be able to front as a partner for a firm. So it's no, but we need to be able to dialogue this issue. Are architects being well paid? And this was all part from what I got from the architect. In terms of cost of living, I don't think that we are earning much, especially when you compare our contemporaries in other industries. But in our industry, what is the ability to pay? Then I also talked about companies' policies to promote long-lasting companies that should that looks at promotion. Um, we have had too many firms that have grown up, and then when the principals pass, the companies die, and that includes that of my former company, Teamwork Design Service, that was led by Architect Kenneth Ampretum, may his soul rest in peace. Now, so what do we look for in trying to sustain firms? And then what culture of growth exists in these companies for young professionals in terms of tuition and all that? Now, so I want to talk a bit about my firm and see where we have come from. We started in 2004. In 2005, I had one architect, one administrator, and one draftsman. Then out of I think I had to let them my admin assistant and my draftsman go for disciplinary issues. And so I had to take on two new draftsmen and then a new admin assistant. In 2009, we increased our number to 3, 2013 to 4, 2019, 5, and 2020, 6. But if you look at the summary of how we have performed, we've had more than 15 interns from KNUST, Central University, University of Edinburgh. We work with Catholic University of Belgium and a few others. Out of those who have come through the office as partners, trying to write their professional exams, we've had 14 entries, 12 passes. So far, none of the architects that have joined my firm has left, but we have had 6 draftsmen leave. Now, the biggest issue for me is that the issues that would make my staff happy are the things that also sometimes become the heavyweights, that weighs us down in trying to manage the office. Salaries, allowances, statutory payments. Allowances like working overtime, statutory payments, social security, pay as you earn. Then what benefits do we give them? Do we give them maybe opportunity to go to school, to go for training and all of that, educational opportunities? Do we sponsor as our staff? No, we don't. I mean, we haven't been able to do that basically because of financial issues. But we try to encourage our staff when it comes to professional development, and then improve our working environment, because it ties in with performance. Now, I try to look at where we are when it comes to salary earning. There isn't much data in Ghana, but there's incomes in Ghana too much. But if you compare on the international level, you realize that medical practitioners of all sorts make more money than we do. Computer scientists, those in the IT industry, make more money than we do. Then airline pilots make more money than we do. And the frustration is not just us. And I have a few architects friends who work outside who also complain about low earnings and all that. But who are those who we can compare our earnings with? Now, here are the questions that I want to ask going forward, so that it can serve as the basis of our debate today. I asked why architects are poorly paid, and it's difficult to tell why, but I don't think that we earn our due. Now, and then also when it comes to the general policy on earnings. So for instance, if I am applying for a job from through the public procurement processes for public jobs, the processes for keying in my man-hour charges and all, by the time you finish, you realize that it falls short of what our professional fees actually stipulates. And so, if you earn less, then it means that you can't just pay your workers, as much as you would want. Now, are architect employers refusing to pay architects economic wages deliberately? For me, it is no. I mean, unless, of course, we are all despicable me kind of people who don't want to be able to pay our workers. But we want to try and pay, but the company needs to be sustained. So for now, if you ask me that, what was I thinking in 2002? And now, I ask myself whether I wasn't even too mean and too harsh to my bosses. But that is also just drawing sympathies to myself, because now I'm a principal. So I think that is also one debate that we need to have. And I'm sure we are going to have a very good discussion based on that. But then we also need to find what actually would be the game changer. Now, first and foremost, I need to ask that how many clients in our private sector would want to pay full professional fees? And the GIA has taken the lead in this issue, where we want to find ways of engaging, first look at revising our professional fees through engaging various institutions. The ARC and the GIA are together coming, engaging the public procurement agency to see how all these things can change to be able to help the architects earn better. Now, but generally, how many clients in the public sector would want to pay full fees? In one of the reports that we did in 2006, the GIA, the GIS, the Ghana Institution of Engineering and all, we realized that there are certain institutions who would not even pay for sketch design. I mean, like the universities, for instance, when you work for them, sketch design is basically free, and they don't pay beyond 6%. We fought this. I mean, it's something that we have to go as one front to be able to look at what we have to do to be able to make sure that architects earn better. Our fees commensurate with man-hour inputs with special reference to PPE method of PPA, sorry, public procurement agency method of procurement. Absolutely not. But what needs to change? Can the community of architects legislate earnings? I don't think that the GIA can force private sector groups, offices like our firms to insist. But I think that we can negotiate. I mean, based on the same negotiations that we can learn from the TUCs and all that, where we can have some kind of collective bargaining approaches. But it has to be very good, because you basically take on the number of architects that you can afford to pay. I mean, no more, no less. So so can we come up and negotiate for some kind of minimum wages for certain classified architects, so that maybe if you are out of school with your GIA, what is the minimum you can get? If you earn five years at workplace, what can you, how much would you be worth, and all of that? We need to be able to debate this, but can we legislate it? I don't know. I mean, it is for us to discuss. Would such a policy affect employment levels? Yes, I think so. Now, are architect employers refusing to pay architects? Many architects will respond to this as yes. But is this true? I mean, I'm sure the divide of principals and then workers would debate this on end. And today we will have the opportunity to talk about it. What is the level of transparency that is needed in the firms to avert this notion? I mean, we've had this discussion over and over again, and you ask yourself, the moment you open up the finances to staff and you let everybody see the burden and the whole cumbersome nature of running the office, I'm sure that it could be one of the avenues that could reduce the kind of demands that employee architects make of their principals. And so then we have to finally talk about our leadership ethos. What kind of leadership are we expecting? Do we expect from our principals? How transparent should they be? How much should they, look at, the circumstances of their employers to find ways of making sure that they are comfortable and psyched up properly to be able to work in the offices. So the game changer. I think that policy engagement is key. That's the first thing that I think we should look at. That will mean that we're engaging, especially the various ministries that the government is certainly the biggest employer. So we need to be able to engage them at that front to make sure that you don't substitute our scale of fees with some kind of man-hour charges that we find it difficult to be able to match up the fee charges. But we certainly have to do advocacy, especially when it comes to private sector, because it is ability to pay and an offer and payment. So that one, when it comes to advocacy, I think it's something that we all have to do. I mean, this should be in the bosom of the Ghana Institute of Architects. We need to be able to market good architecture, so that we can draw clear distinction between, why our service is needed. We also need very strong regulation of the architectural space. There are so many firms that are not under the umbrella of the Ghana Institute of Architects. There's so many, firms that are, working under, some pseudo engineering and still doing architecture. A lot of them come and work without proper registration, and you can cite a few companies that have done that. And so I think that we need to come to the point where we can have a proper regulation of the architectural space, so that when the clean demand is done, we can, that demand is created, we will be in the position to be able to negotiate for better fees. But finally, about the employer architects, we need to be able to look at our new leadership ethos. Something must be done about our leadership, because I'm sure there are hundreds of young architects who are feeling the same way as I felt in 2002. But we need to be able to give them comfort, for them to be able to stay in the offices, learn and become architects that is worth this country, to be able to complement national development. I was told, about a young architect who was having issues with his boss, and that his social security wasn't being paid, and therefore he moved to another. Decided that, okay, I want to be on my own. So then I questioned the young architect that, so for the 2 years that you be on your own, have you paid social security for yourself, because you have to prepare for retirement? He said no. So then I asked myself that, where are we? Because it's easier to request of somebody to be able to make certain payments than you doing it for yourself. So there are real discussions that has to be made. So at this particular point, I think I can end my presentation and then hand over to the moderator, and let's see where the discussion can go. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. S.M. Kote. I'd like you to have a word on this before we move into our question and answer time.
Okay, so I mean, Tony, that was an excellent presentation there. and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I could identify with a lot of the things that you were talking about. I would want to just say that for me, the issue of the architect employer, architect employee relationship thing, for me, when I was on the other side, some of my frustration had to do with not knowing which direction we were going. What's the firm going? Where are we going? Or sometimes truly not knowing the nature of the business, not understanding certain things that was going on in the office. And I just come in and I work. There was one of the places that I worked, and for 6 months or so, there were financial difficulties, obviously. And at a certain point, we were behind with salaries about 3.5 months to 4 months. And there was never a meeting with staff to discuss and be told, this is exactly what is going on, and this is what we require of you as staff. I thought that was very frustrating. I mean, so there are these things that sometimes so sometimes my frustration as an employee used to be the language that my bosses used to use, like very unpleasant or actually insulting language, you know. I, so there were days, for example, there were Mondays that we kind of suspected that there were tension days, and you come to the office and you're almost scared because you don't know what is going to let your boss go off the hook and things like that. And this is not for all the bosses that I work with. Some of them had the decorum, they would control themselves even if they were upset or unhappy. But these things we went through, sometimes basic things like the tools we worked with was not present to assist us to work. And I thought it was very frustrating. So there are some of these things that I resolved that as a boss, you would have to do better about it. So sometimes I would, for now being on this side, I look at things like identifying the talents or speciality or the areas of speciality of the staff, trying to help the staff to develop there. And then as well, a lot of conversation. I mean, basically, every architect, for me, what I do is that if I employ you, it means that I actually think that you are actually as good as me or actually better. That's my, I like to employ people who I feel they are as good as me or better than me. So then, I mean, where would come in insults and terrible language and things that it should be out of. So most of the time as well, it's about making a lot of communications that your staff are aware of the challenges you are going through. And sometimes actually you get a lot of sympathy, which helps you through your own very difficult moments, because this profession can be very lonely and very difficult. And if you have staff understanding what you go through, it helps you a lot. In good times, we've tried to say that give the staff an opportunity to grow, like exposures, exhibitions out of the country, etc., so that they feel as if there is a certain future. We are growing. When people don't feel they are growing, they feel very frustrated. So it's not so completely all about how much you earn at the end of the month. But I mean, do you feel respected in the space that you go to work in every day? Are you aware of the challenges or the not just the challenges, but the good things that are about to be happening in there? It gives you also some sense of hope when you're working on a project because your boss has told you the kind of things that are being expected on such a, but it's always a need to kind of pep up the staff, kind of get them up, because truly it can be frustrating staring at your screen the whole time and things that. And so my thing has been that you have to create a beautiful working environment. Really, that's it. It's a creative environment. When people are coming to work in the morning, they must be feeling that, wow, I love to be in this space here. I love the people I work with are my friends. My boss is cool. I love to interact with them. And I think that when you do that, you get generally very effective office going. And I think that one of the things I found out for myself being a boss, and this I admit it openly, is that many of us could be at best very skilled as architects, whether design, whether post contract, but then almost all of us are not prepared to run an office, run a business, lead a people. That is different from architecture. So that is where actually many of us have failed. I mean, I've had my failures in that department. So what happens is that maybe I think, oh, wow, we just got some money for this job. Then immediately, oh, this guy needs a car. So you buy the car for the person. Next 6 months, you don't have any money. Somebody else too says, when am I also getting a car? And then you don't have anything for the person. Suddenly there's chaos in the office. If I was truly a good businessman, maybe I would understand that I didn't even need to take all of that money to go buy the car. Maybe I should engage a bank or get a loan and get this and be paying in bits and things like that. Maybe I don't even need to run my office from a space like this. Maybe it's too expensive for my income. I should run it from another place or something. I mean, there are things about running business though that I think that most architect employers don't know it. And you employees, you don't know it either because we've just been trained to be good architects at best. Now we get to a point where good architecture, you think you've worked for 8 years, you think you worked for 10 years, you think you have enough clientele, and you want to run an office. It's another ball game completely. And many of us have been found wanting in here. I'm ready to open up for questions and for us to give responses to them. So thank you, Fifi. That will be the bits that I'll add to what Tony said.
Wow, wow, great. So behind the SM, there was a young boy who also went through the mill. And as Tony said, despicable me, referring to a me, a despicable boss. So I'm sure you've also had a despicable boss, and you've also been the one calling the despicable. Right. It's very good for us. I'd also be interested in how to run an office as a business, but I guess that another subject for another day, because your audience is quite youthful. You have a youthful audience. So far, we've been talking about the architect being employed by an architect, but we would want to hear a little about an architect being employed in the formal sector or in the government sector. AC Ajololo, could we have AC to give us a brief overview of how it feels to also work in the public sector? Hello, AC.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Wonderful.
I guess everything is very well structured there, so you have it very good in the formal or public sector.
It would have been a perfect thing to say yes to, but as in all institutions, there are a bit of challenge here and there. The structure within the public service is not perfect, but it's not too good as well. The architect being the employee, in most cases, you find yourself being second fiddle most of the time to somebody who does not know much about the field in which you are working in, which is not too much of a problem. But along the line, technical things and your expertise and skills are usurped, and it gives room for concern and for worry. As architect Tony Asare and our president said, the changes that need to come into our sphere of professional life need to not only be in the private sector, but also in the public sector. Can you imagine that somebody who is an architect has been working for many years as an employee and certain benefits thereof are not given? When I say benefits, I'm talking, for example, about paying of yearly subscriptions, allowances for traveling out to run errands for the organization. It's not the same in all of the public sectors, but in most of the public sectors, you have one or two challenges. When it comes to remuneration, your professional work is not seen as a unique part of the work that you're doing, but as a general part of what you're doing. And I think that the GIA or the ARC has to give some education, maybe as Tony said, some advocacy will be required, for such public institutions to understand the roles of professionals, not only architects, but engineers equally. The doctor and the lawyer seems to be ahead of our game, but we also need to work and meet them or even surpass them where our work is concerned. This discussion on the public sector, I think I would ask that we look at it just as we are looking at the private sector for another forum, and then I think other colleagues in the public sector will also come and share their views and their ideas on how best we can make things work for all of us.
Exactly, I see. From where we sit, sometimes we think it's all rosy on that side. Since you have your statutory payments, like the SNITs and the payee tax, but we are learning that there's more to it than just those two statutory payments. So I'm sure council will take it on and then get the appropriate forum to get your other colleagues on board. Those are the banks, those are the assemblies. I'm sure we have quite a number of architects in the public sector who have something for us.
Yes.
So we'll be going to our question and answer time. So when the questions come, our resource persons, architect SM Forte and Tony Asari, would choose to pick them up. To our audience, please let your questions come so we can make the best of our resource persons. For the one who wanted to share his experience, you can notify me and you'll be given audience to verbally share your experience so we can have it properly. Now we have two comments from our audience. From Angelo France, he says, can firms introduce project bonuses as a legislative policy to augment low wages? Can firms introduce project bonuses as a legislative policy to augment low wages?
Okay, so I would like to speak to that. So I don't know about the word legislative, but I mean, I don't have it as a legislative policy, but I tend to do this. But I would say that sometimes it's cost me, or it's caused more problems for me than actually I reckoned at the beginning. Why is it so? The thing is that bonus suggests that on that project there was profit. Now we can have a project that actually drills us as an office so much. Maybe the client is very notorious. You do the sketch design, you've done it again, you've done it again. They've changed the site, you've done, and it's still the same fee. They are not, open to negotiate and increase the fee. And so maybe the project architect and the team of technicians that are working on it are so stretched on that particular project. But that project gives you no profit as an office. And therefore, you are unable to give any bonus to the people who worked on it. Now, another project could be that maybe it gets worked on. It does not even bring as much strain and stress to the staff deployed to work on it. And there's a bigger profit on that. Now, what happens for me, and this is where I said that actually many of us do not understand how to run an office. So in my normal self, that project which I thought that, oh, we've gotten some good money on it immediately, I just say, oh, wow, let's share some bonus. Or so you give maybe staff some kind of a year. The next time, the other person working on other projects which he's been extremely stretched and got nothing in return, spent more man hours, feels that he's been unfairly treated because he's not getting bonus for labor that he's put in. So the intention is fine. This January, my office have been debating on how we are going to do this, whether it's a policy that the bonus gets shared over the entire office and not necessarily by the team that worked on the project. But I mean, I have an office currently at our low, we have 6 architects. I mean, years past, we had probably about 8 to 10 architects. When you have things like that, and this person's worked on, this person's worked on it, this one got a bonus, this one didn't get a bonus, it can start to create problems for you in the office itself. And the whole mathematics of working and calculating what this one should get for this project and that project, it's also another cumbersome thing that the architect boss who trained just the way you, the architect employee, trained, doesn't have the brains and all the understanding to do all of this kind of mathematics and calculations and sharing. So it ends up sometimes giving you more headache than the incentive that you want to give to the employers. But it's not, for me personally, I don't think it's a wrong thing to do. I think it's a good thing. I sometimes even, not just project bonus, sometimes what I've done in my office for years is that I actually give a private job to the client, to the staff. Maybe a friend of mine comes in his family or his old schoolmate. I probably can't charge the person a very good rate for it to be worth my office time. I could give it to one of the architects or the technicians and say, take it as a private job, do it your private time and things like that, and then take up this money for it. So we've done things like that to try to augment the salary. Again, if you don't take a one time, the other staff says, every time this person gets some private job, me alone, you don't give me some. So sometimes, yeah, that's my quick response to that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Angelo, I hope you are satisfied. We have a question from Ajasai that goes like, what clear indicators should the architect have to know that it is time to start a firm? After we take that, we'll be having Karen Fianu share an experience with us. So please, when you take that, what clear indicators should an architect have to know that it's time to start a firm?
Well, I think that the current, yes, I think the current council is looking at that vis-a-vis the professional practice examinations. That like what we have in with other professionals. For instance, if you get out of the law school and you finish your PPA, you are ready to start your own firm. In the time of Professor Mills 30 of blessed memory, we were looking at 10 years post-graduation, which is one of the reasons why I wrote that article, A Decade of Footmanship. We think that if you are really qualified to be able to hold your own out there, you should be able to start your own firm. So for me, I agree that we should be able to allow that.
Tony, I want to add something to this though. Ajay, I want to just say that all of us must recognize who we are and what potentials we have. I mean, there are people who are very good architects, no question about it. They can design, they can do run projects, but actually you do not have the ability to run an office and you can fail woefully. So this whole thing about running an office, we make it oversimplistic if we just look at it that, oh, after your 10 years, or maybe if council is able to push the current conversation such that now, right after your professional examination, you have the freedom to run your practice. Immediately, then people say, okay, then I'm running my business. You would find out that many will crumble because running the practice is not just your ability to design or to do a certain project. There's a lot more to running the practice, handling staff, and even your ability to attract businesses. And truly, the more we fragment, the more we have all these solitary firms, one person, two persons, etc. You have the right to do them, but actually, the weaker we get. So I would not pose an answer quickly and say, oh, these are the indicators that if you have, then it means that you are in a position to run your practice. I think there's a lot more things to consider before you make that step, though. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. We have a lot of questions, so we'll ask our resource persons to be brief. We'll collate all the questions asked, and that will inform how we should fashion our next interactive session. We'll now take Freeman Agbomanyi to share some experience with us. So, Freeman. Hello, Freeman. Okay, so before he comes on, we have another question from Ajasai, which is from your assessment, can an architect employee become rich? Yes. So,
hello.
Yes, so Freeman, please, 1 minute. So from Ajasa, he says, from your assessment, Can the architect employee become rich? Can you become rich whilst working for a firm?
Well, I want to say that from my experience, it's not an easy thing. Where to say that rich will be to say your income is far outweighs your expenditures or something like that. If that is a simple definition of saying you are rich, it means that what you are earning, it is far more than what you spend. So you have surplus, or you are able to meet all your needs from your income and have surplus. I think that it is not an easy thing. I mean, in the first place, the architect employee needs to note that hardly any of his bosses or the architect employer himself even has that rich status. So if you are being paid by the boss who is not even rich, it is almost becoming it is more difficult for the rich man to enter the kingdom of God than so it's not an easy situation. I mean, but it is not. I'm not saying that it's not easy because that's that, but also because even your bosses themselves are not rich. Simply, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Vivi, let me quickly just. I think that sometimes the questions may not sound very. I don't know whether it's appropriate, especially in our present circumstances. But Norman Foster is worth $200 million. Frank Gehry is worth about $100 million. The question is, how much is our worth as architects? If we take the leading architects, obviously I can ask Mr. President how much he's worth. I mean, if you pick the lots of architects, 1,000 of us, and we cannot have one or two architects out of us worth, say, $2 million or $5 million in our present circumstances. We need to be able to ask ourselves why, because and as a young architect, our question why, after my senior architects working for 5 years, 10 years, for 15 years, 20 years, why are they not rich? And so it then becomes a debate. Why are we not being paid properly? Is the economy not big enough to be able to grow architects to become rich? Those are questions that we need to be able to ask. So, I mean, in context, I think that's what the questioner is asking. So let's look at it, and let's see why we are not moving from where we are basically subsisting, to where we can have surpluses, as Mr. President is saying, to the point that an architect may possibly own maybe a yacht, maybe some building, maybe a 10-story or something like that. However, we get real estate developers or architects who have switched into those areas, making that kind of money. So we need to be able to question even how we make money and whether it is even sustainable the way we are, that when you go on retirement, you basically have nothing, that kind of thing. I think we need to talk about this a bit more. Thank you.
Okay, good. So for a younger architect or an employee who wants to share his experience, he may raise his hand and then we'll have him on. For now, Freeman, you have about 30 seconds to make your submission so we can take the rest of the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Architect Samawachi. Greetings to my president and Honorable Tony Asari. I salute you all for the good work you are doing so far. I hope I'm clear now.
Yes,
now, what I want to share is that, yes, I was so desirous to run a firm, even at the point where I was a student. I created a limited liability company, which I was running on campus before I completed the architecture. But I was still working with my bosses. Okay, I had 3 bosses I was serving at the same time: Architect Amuzu, Architect Gifosu Forcing, and Architect Johnson. I was serving them although from a distance, but I was serving them as a corporate entity, partnering them in a way before I even have to stay in one office, that is Arc Integra, and to do my professional examination and charter with Arc Integra. And I must say that I think the mindset of it should be reframed. We shouldn't be so one-way thinking. We should think out of the box because we are creative-oriented professionals, and as such, we shouldn't look at one way of designing to make money. There are many ways already. The internet has made things even worse for us because a client goes onto the internet, downloads some plan, and feels like he can get it done. So we need to be diverse in our way of thinking.
Okay,
and again,
Freeman, you have 5 seconds.
Thank you very much, architect. And the architect employee can also look at becoming a partner to the employer in a way, by the way you even your attitude towards your employer will let your employer becomes a partner in the near future. And that is what I am doing now. I'm now a partner more or less to Architect Amuzu, who was then my boss. And for me, it's a beautiful thing. And we have a great future as we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Freeman. So I guess your point being made is the employees to position themselves in a way to become partners.
Exactly.
Okay,
Sure.
okay. I think that is well taken. We'll continue with our questions. We have quite a lot of them here. So from KK, he says, does the GIA check firms or practices they give operating licenses to, whether they meet statutory obligations? And also, does the GIA have a mechanism to allow members to whistleblow on practices who do not meet statutory obligations? So does the GIA have a mechanism for whistleblowers on practices who do not meet statutory obligations?
No, we do not have. And I mean, as president, when I was welcoming this conversation, I'm looking to ideas and suggestions as to how we can sanitize this employer-employee relationship. So I think it's a good suggestion that we could be looking at here.
Okay, so another one comes from KK. He says, why is there nothing in the code of ethics of the GIA that addresses relationship between employer and employees?
I would simply say that the proponents or the people who put it together, the documents that time, these were the issues that they thought was key. It was more to do with what guides our practice with our clients and the like. But today, it's time for us to look at these things and amend them. Nothing stops it. I mean, and at our next AGM, if there are things that we want to put in, I mean, this is the journey. The things that we saw people do in the past does not have to stay so forever. Right.
Yeah. So Kofi Asare says, employees can position themselves to become partners. But the real question is, how many firms have a clear path to partnership? Yeah. So I think this is more of a contribution about the firms, whether they have a clear path to partnership and they've made it known to the employees. Right. So we have also from an anonymous attendee, it is suggested that any organization employing 5 personnel need the services of a professional HR, either in-house or part-time. It is my suggestion that we as an institute or office engage the services of other professional bodies, accountants, etc. I think that's a contribution.
Fifi, can I quickly say something on this? I think the last point that you made, for example, is a very good point. But you see, these are the things that when I say that we need knowledge in running business, it's a very key thing. The thing is that, let's say in my office, we have, say, a front desk or my PA. So there's a secretary. And then we have an accountant. And then, okay, for some time we had 2 accountants. I mean, one of them is supposed to be gifted with HR skills. Now, if you don't take care, the truth is that in all of these supports and things that I mean, a firm when you have 4 or 5 or you're having like 6, if you have 3 people being support staff, it can become a little lopsided for your income. It means that you are a little too biased in people who are not bringing a direct income to the business. So it is a big question. We ought to find how we're going to go about it. But really, when you're a boss and you're thinking about your income and how to pay and go to, some of the times what happens is that you recognize that you could use, I mean, you probably need an IT person, you probably need, but you calculate and say the one that you can almost handle with your income. That's what you tend to do. The question earlier on, the suggestion about the clear path to partnership. I mean, it's a very interesting conversation. I mean, what I want to say is that I was at a position where in my former company, for example, there had been a discussion about what they term associates and even a letter prepared for us. It never happened. In my own practice as well, there have been times when I've engaged some of the staff, maybe one or two people who at a certain time I've thought that they had shown certain commitment. But truly, the word is commitment. I mean, you can have worked at a firm for so many years, and truly, yes, you go there every morning and evening, but does your boss find that you are that committed to the cause that you should be given that step? And truly, what kind of partnership is it? In other businesses, what happens is that when you're going to be a partner, they have a value for the business. And then they said that, okay, maybe the business is worth $500,000. So to be a partner, maybe you need to bring a $50,000, and then now you become a 10% shareholder in the business. In most of our architecture conversations, people expect that it is more like in recognition of your commitment. If it's in more of your recognition of your commitment to the firm, if you check international standards, you are hardly ever getting anything up to 10%. Is that appealing enough for the person? And immediately the person engages in this partnership, the other requirements on the partner, many times you'll be surprised that the young architect, when he's faced with that and told that, okay, so now I'm going to give you 5% partnership, but by this 5% partnership, you have to bring all your private jobs to the table. You cannot do this, you cannot do this, you have to do this and that and that. The person actually can think about it and say, I don't want to be a partner. I've had conversations with people, I mean, at least one or two people before, where we're talking about possibility of partnership. And it didn't seem completely that maybe the terms was actually what the person thought was best for them. So apart from that, because we are in creative world, sometimes the truth is that everybody has a direction and the way that they want to run a business. Now, if you say we become partners, it means that we are agreeing that we are going in a certain direction. And sometimes it is not easy to find that person who has that same concept with you to run things together. So these are realities which sometimes does not help the whole conversations of partners to happen. We can scan around us and see how many have formed partnership and in a matter of a short time have broken this partnership. I think that the conversation really needs to be explored very well. It's not that simple.
Great. So with the questions we are compiling, we might not be able to go through all, but definitely it's giving us a direction on what our membership are looking out for. We'll share that also in due course, but we'll go through as much as we can. Kweku Osei Edu says, introduce business course as part of professional practice courses in schools. He's suggesting 5th year and 6th year, including an extensive project management course. So that's a suggestion from Kweku Osei Edu. Okay. So we have another one. Okay, this is quite long. It's from Godwin Jan. It says, in your estimation, what should be the range of remuneration for a young architect just out of school with just 1 year of national service experience? That's one. In your estimation, what should an architect who has completed a PPE and passed and has about 5 years of experience be paid? So we have first the one who has just finished school and the one who has passed his PPE with 5 years of experience. How about an architect who is 10 years out of school? And are you paying these amounts to your staff, or will you be able to pay such monies should you have any of these 3 categories of individuals mentioned above? What is the GIA and ARC doing in respect of standardizing pay scale backed by law and ensuring that owners of firms abide by this rule? So he's talking about.
I want to just say that I have a personal thing that I wish. For me, I think that right after school, that architect who has just done 1 year should be earning something in the neighborhood of over 5,000 cities. Should be. I think that if you've done your GIA, PPA, and then you are 5 years haven't worked after that, I think that you should be something closer to, say, $1,500 equivalent, which is probably, let's say, about, say, 8,000, 9,000 cities. I think that these are decent. I'm not able to pay that. This is what I wish I could have paid. I'm not able to pay that. What I think that anybody who suggests that GIA or ARC must have like a capping or a professional, it must have salary limits to bind firms, must think again. They have to show me which profession has that for their private practitioners. Which profession has that? Or better still, which architectural institute in which part of the world has that? I do not know any. The truth is that sometimes a firm can run business, can be going to office 6 months work, and then you've hardly received any monies. And you'll be drawing on monies that you have kept in the past. I mean, I think it is not, we cannot, I mean, I have not heard any. I would welcome any knowledge about any country that has in the architectural industry or professional industry for their private practitioners salary caps being used. I don't know any.
Okay, right.
Yes, let me just throw in one short one. I have a little cousin who is a lawyer, completed, a chartered lawyer, finished pupillage, and working in Accra, who earns just under 2,500 Ghana cedis, and that's a lawyer. And meanwhile, I have another cousin who works with one of these financial institutions, also with similar qualifications, a second degree, and having worked for about 6-7 years, who earns about 7,000 cedis. Now, one works with a regulatory body and a financial regulatory body, whilst the other works with a private sector legal firm. It's not and whether it's not a certification or an endorsement of whether one is more important than the other, but it is just the way the system is able to accept, based on their income, how to be able to treat their workers and be able to hold on to them. The difficulty that we have is that you cannot pay what you are not able to earn. And that is why it is difficult to decide that you want to be able to legislate or cap earnings of genius. I mean, this discussion would just have to come to the point where we can grow companies, expect that when economies expand, we will be able to earn more and be able to pay more. And basically, I think that is it.
Okay, right. So we have this question from Morgan. He says, if Masons with no formal training earn 90 cedis a day, that is 2,700 cedis monthly. So if young architects out of school with their rendering skills earn more with their PPs, what will really compel them to work in offices? I think this is a pandemic we are facing in our profession now. So we'd like to hear from our resource persons on this. Okay, they earn more with their rendering than being in the offices.
Yeah, I want to say that it is pathetic. I've heard this conversation before. I know that Masons earn that, and I think that it is pathetic that people go through School of Architecture. It is very sad. It is really most unfortunate, but it's true. I'm not arguing against it that it does happen in some firms. What I would like to say though is that the world is not, in your professional development, it's not about what you earn today alone. I mean, as I said in my introduction, I worked for 10 years for other people before I started my practice. And I must be honest, somewhere along the line, as I said, after my first 3-4 years, I quit, stayed at home. I was asking myself, is this what's working for people, is this what brings me? Maybe I'll just sit at home. If I get something small, I do. I actually, at that time, I was actually even teaching some people CAD, because CAD was now the thing, and then there are a lot of people who didn't know how to. So I would go around and then teach some people at TDC and things like that. And I thought that the income I was making was much better than working in Accra. I was staying in Tema. But the truth is that um, many of my colleagues who stayed that way and worked on their PPs and things like that, today, they continue to stay small. Many of them, many, not everybody, but many. Because what happens is that architecture is one profession that the person who wants to do the 20-story, the 10-story, you can be his nephew. He's not bringing you, their company is not bringing you that job when you have not had a certain experience and exposure. So the call for you to study under some firm and learn and get the experience, it's not only about the salary that you get every month. It's about the jobs that you'll be exposed on, which nobody can take it away from you. Today, I speak and I say to people, I worked on Standard Chartered Bank, Spintex Road, what they call it, Independence Avenue, Kumasi. But those were not my jobs. They were Duega's jobs. But can they take it away from my CV? No. But was Standard Chartered at that time have given me an opportunity as a young architect to do that? No, they wouldn't have. So the truth that I encourage a lot of you is that if you look only at the monthly income that you're going to get from your PP, yes, true, there will be justification for you not to work with any firm that cannot match it for you. But you need a lot more than, you need a lot of experience, which you not get the exposure to certain big projects. You not get them as a young architect doing PPs alone. You have to, the tutelage is what is going to expose you to that. So I urge us to think twice about this whole thing. You are not fully baked when right after school, because the income is a little low. Take it that you're going through some kind of extra tutelage, extra schooling. Work with some firm, get more jobs that you work under. It builds your confidence, and then you now be ready to actually be out there on your own to do bigger projects. We need you people or to develop your potential. I feel very sad about some friends of mine, younger friends. I saw them from when they were in school. They were great, fantastic potentials. For just the reason that the offices were not paying them well, they stopped working there. They work privately on their own. And actually, I tell you, to date, I see some of them, they've never risen to the potential I knew they were capable of getting to. Today, I am doing the kind of projects I am, thankful to the offices I work at and the exposures that I had. You need it. It's priceless. Nobody will take it away from you. Eventually, it makes up for the money that you think that you're losing by working for bosses. Thank you.
Yes. Architect Tony, anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, that was an excellent response. I mean, I'm sure other senior architects on the forum would endorse it. All of us have benefited from our previous jobs and workplaces. And myself, I mean, at the time when I was out, I was working with my former boss. I worked on naval headquarters, worked on Burma Hall, did huge projects where, I mean, I couldn't have dreamt that anybody would call me and give me that kind of job. But did you do it alone? No. You know, at the time, we had bosses who were always breathing down your shoulder, teaching you the techniques, show you how to write, good communication letters, show you how to lead, teams, leading site meetings, doing good presentations, writing good technical proposals. That is what makes you posted for securing a big job. It's the rendering doesn't. I mean, at the time, nobody even wants to look at your drawing when you are trying to secure a job. So I think that's an excellent answer, and we all have to learn from that. Thank you.
Great. So the takeaway is that there's more to architecture than just rendering. So at this point, I'll share a little experience of mine in this observation. You realize that for the renderings, you could be earning something good. So you could maybe start an office. And unfortunately, you get on younger architects who would not have the privilege of having a proper office tutelage. And it breaks a cycle or a generation of architects. So they also grow up not knowing how to do things in a professional way. Mostly those who render a lot are not interested in professional exams. So they don't even have an encounter with the professional way of doing things. And that breaks the cycle for a generation of architects who would grow up and might find it too embarrassing to join their kids to write exams. So I think this is something we can also look in later to ensure that our graduates from school get good placements in the offices and are not left to go on their own to redefine what it means to practice professionally. We'll take this also from Karen. Karen Fianu says, can we be taught the business of architecture and office management in school? Can we be taught the business of architecture and office management in school?
I've been one person that I've often made mention that at least in school, when we present our works in school, we must also have a fee negotiation as part of your presentation. So say if your class or you are designing, let's say, a laboratory, an office building, when you present it, as the jurors have gone through your concept and your drawing your plans and things like that, towards the end or maybe in the course of the day, there should be a discussion on negotiation. So they should be able to ask you, Mr. Awache, how much do you want to take for this project? And you must say it, and then they must negotiate with you or throw you off in the way that the real world does, so that it kind of hones your negotiation skill. The part about office practice and things, what I remember is that what the school, the curriculum in 50th and 60th, what it does is, especially 60th, it makes you dress up to go to office. So it gives you that kind of preparation about when you finish school, going to office. But and then sitting down from morning till evening, that kind of training. But it does not prepare you for running the business of architecture. I think that it is understandable because, truly speaking, for the years, it's like you finish school, do several years of tutelage before this question of whether you are even going to go into practice of architecture, as in being a boss, will come in. So really, I think it's stretching it to ask that we study that part though in school. But we could have a conversation about that as well.
Okay. Right. So there's one from George Osei Asumini, and he says the ministry does not pay the approved 16.5%, and sometimes come as low as 6.8, 6 or 8%. What is the institute doing about it?
Well, Tony mentioned that this has been an ongoing thing. There's a document that was put together. A panel was set during Architect Dade's term. I was chairman of one of the committees. We put together some documents not too long ago. I think that in December or so was submitted to ARC. They had collated other submissions from other like sister disciplines like engineers, etc. It's going to be looked at. The honest thing is that the 16 point whatever percentage, from our observation, it seemed like out of not comparable, not competitive to other nations around us. So many people, I don't know if any of us here ever experienced a project which you got that 16.5%. I never did. I mean, I tell people that one of projects that I worked on that I got 10%, I was actually even amazed. And 10% being for the entire team. I mean, most projects have not been very good, and it goes for all of us. So the 16.5, it's we found that to be, it wasn't working. It was on the papers, but nobody was accepting it. So this conversation is ongoing. We are hoping that we'll get some conclusion on it very soon. Yeah. But I think that we should also look as architects at not just percentage. In worldwide, in recent times, the question of fees from percentage has become not so welcoming to most clients. I think that most clients are deferring more to the man-hour rates and things like that. It seems a little more justified. So we should probably, there should be a CPD that I think we've suggested already, that would learn how to calculate these man-hour rates and things like that, it becomes something that you can easily win your argument with your clients. The percentages, the clients often say things like, what if we decide not to use marble, but we use terrazzo? What if we decide to do that? And they often frown. And immediately they hear percentage, they often just frown at the whole fee thing. So the world, and for most people we know, though, they are going more into this man-hour charges, and we should learn more about what the principal architect's man-hour rate is, what the project architect, what the young architect, what the technician's man-hour rate is, what's the PA, and then we should use that to calculate our fees more, and probably it will become easier to defend it or to get it paid. Thank you.
Okay, right. So from Joe Gani, he says, will it be good to say that firms in this country emerges as a result of frustration from past experience of architects? Like those who are frustrated in their offices, they come out to open firms. So will it be good to say that firms in this country emerges as a result of frustration from past experience of architects?
I think it's not a fair comment. You know, most of us who in our time ended up forming, yes, there was a bit of frustration. Yes, we wanted new directions. A lot of us moved into forming our firms because we wanted to be a bit more contemporary, because most of our firms were doing more manual drawings, and we wanted to learn to do AutoCAD and all of that. So it wasn't just driven by the frustration to earn more. Then also, you know, at a point you look at whether you are you know you are strong enough to be able to start something, to build your own private CV. I remember when I started my firm, architect Adote Brown picked me up and took me to lunch and had a word with me, and you know, telling me what I needed to do if I was going to run, you know, a successful office. I'm wondering whether he even remembers that. I also went to speak to President SM Kote as well. You know, he gave me an advice and told me, look, Tony, be careful that every drawing that gets out of your office, you supervise it yourself and you know what goes out, so that you don't get embarrassed. There were pointers, you know, there were pointers that we wanted to do on our own, but you know, we were basically helped and you know, tutored and mentored by some other colleagues, and you know, that is how you try to set up, you know. So it's not just the frustrations. I mean, at a point you just realize that your private earnings is becoming a bit more than you are earning in the office. So then you decide that you want to be on your own.
Okay, Tony, I want to add that, I mean, I look back and personally, I didn't think that I was going to run my own firm. I was in such awe of my former employers, Mr. Grutter, Mr. Brown. I mean, for me, they were such, I mean, luminaries of the profession. And each day that I worked with them, I mean, if I did some work and then Mr. Grutter said, fantastic. I mean, I thought that it is like the highest praise one could get. And I was looking forward to working there and then growing up there. Obviously, the opportunity there did not come. And the firm was as well struggling at a certain point. I felt sad when I took the decision that I was going to go, but there were ideas that I thought that maybe could have been pursued, but um, I don't think that they were completely in line with what my bosses then thought the business trend should be. So not everybody embarks on an office out of frustration. I've had one or two people who have joined my practice, and right from when they joined my practice, they have actually mentioned, boss, we want to learn from you so that one day we'll run our practice. I mean, and it has not been a hidden conversation. I've known the ambition that one day they would want to do this or that. Besides, I personally, I look at this whole conversation and I'm proud of some of the people who have been in my office and today are running fantastic outfits. I feel proud that I trained them well. I think that my former bosses, when they look at what I'm doing as well, they feel proud of what I'm doing. So we need to birth other architects who one day go out there to run businesses that we'll be proud of. It is not a failure. It is not a sign of frustration in all the cases. Thank you.
Okay. Right. We would have been happy to get a young architect who is an employee to share their real life experiences, but I think we've not gotten any yet. Probably we'll find a way of making it anonymous so that if you care about not being put out there. Okay, we have Kwabena Addison. I don't know whether he's a younger architect, but his hand is up. Let's have a few seconds with him. Okay, Kwabena Addison.
Yes, yes, boss.
Yes, you're on. So please, 30 seconds. Please share your experience or your contribution.
Okay, so I think as a young architect, right, for me, the main focus, right, someone who is preparing for your PPE, the main focus is to learn. All right, the main focus is to learn and then understand the vision or the goal of where you've been placed in terms of the firm in which you are. If you are able to side with the vision of the leader at the firm, then I don't think there should be problems in terms of remuneration and things like that, because you understand whatever is going on. The leader is open to you in everything. So once you understand and you are closer to the leader, you are able to run with him. Okay, so I think it's more about understanding the vision of your leader. That's what I think as a young architect.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. For the sake, let's take 3 comments before we address it. So next we have Gideon. Gideon, please. You're on. Yeah. Gideon Esando.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Gideon. You're live, right?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Personally, I'm not someone that was the mentality I had way back. I mean, growing up, all right. But then I've been under mentorship, right, from some people. I'm not in an architectural firm now. I'm working for a construction firm right after school. I got the opportunity to work for a construction firm, but I'm under the mentorship of SM, right, the president now, and I've learned so much that though I'm not under an architect, I've learned that as an architect, you just find your purpose, right, and then you find your niche. Because not the mistake that most of us do is that we think because we've gone through architecture school, so we are supposed to be full architects, right? Which is the problem. So we end up fighting for battles that are not ours. You get it? And we stay. If you do that, we forever stay poor. You get it? We still stay in the same area. I have this thing I say to myself that you serve to be served. Right? No matter what you do, if you serve with all diligence, you get to the point where you also be served. So it's not all about rushing to start a firm. Okay. No, it's not all about rushing to start a firm, but it's about diligently learning and then using the time that you have now. I mean, build capacity. And then when you get there, and then when it is time to do what you're supposed to do or start your own thing, I think you do great. That's what I personally believe in. And finding your niche, being under mentorship. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we have the good employee. We are grateful for your contribution. So now we'll take Karen Tianu. Hello,
Thank you
Karen.
very much. Yeah, hello. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, you're live.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm grateful for the presentation. So I've learned a lot. I've learned something over the years that we are responsible for our personal growth wherever we find ourselves, even in the architectural firm. Your boss has, for I am a young architect as well, now practicing. And what I've learned is to ask my boss for opportunities. So if there are other maybe negotiations meetings that they are attending, I could ask, because sometimes your boss may not necessarily come to ask you for that, because there are a lot of other people in the firm who are going for those meetings or doing other stuff. So you have to tell your boss that, okay, he's going for this kind of meeting, he's having this kind of project, you want to have that kind of experience. Because if you are not bold enough to request for such things, you may be in a particular firm for years and you will seriously not learn anything, especially if there are lots of people on that in that company. And then apart from that, I've also learned to also research. Apart from other architects that we have in Ghana, we should have to open eye or thank God for technology. If you can research on other architects outside the world, see what they do, and then find a way that works for you. Because sometimes we are limited by just what we see, and when we research more, I think it will open opportunities for us. And I agree with what Gideon said about discovering your niche. I think that will work for us. About finances and what's it called, getting extra money. I think before I started working, my boss told me that money will come, but experience is something that I should never undermine from the beginning. That is what will build my capacity to be a better architect in future. And personally, I've taken that as a great motivation for me. And I must say that I'm learning a lot as time goes by. Thank you very much.
Great, Karen. It's great. You must be enjoying the profession and okay with where you are. I think that's very encouraging for those who have it worse. Would go for Kwabena and Stephen. They would have our closing remarks from our panelists. So, Kwabena Addison, you are live. Hello, Kwabena. Okay,
Hello.
then, okay, right. Please, 20 seconds. Make your submission, right?
I've done.
Okay, right. Kwabena might not be ready. Morgan. Hello,
Yes.
Morgan. Kindly
Hello.
make your guys.
All right. Good evening. I think that it's been very fruitful discussion, and I'm really enjoying it. My submission is just in two simple parts. I think that for young architects, and I would call myself a young architect in this regard, we should all endeavor to give ourselves, let's say, 5 years minimum. Just to see the life cycle of each boss, because you cannot judge a boss's real potential towards an employee within a year or two. At least 5 years give you a wider spectrum to judge. And then to the principals, which I'm also aspiring to be, I think that the same way we feel like people will feel bad times, I think that good times ought to be felt. I mean, and with this, I would actually lay credence to SM. I mean, the things that he's sharing is good. Good times ought to be shared. I mean, an employee couldn't have worked with you for maybe 5 years and never feel good times. Let your employees shower it on them. Let them feel good, and they would serve you as long as you may want. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we would now let our resource persons give their final remarks. All the questions sent in have been noted, and it will shape our next conversation, which will be very soon. This was to open the so we can share some of these things that are done privately. We have one question that just popped up. It says, do our resource persons give employment contracts and pay snips? I think in answering that, you can wrap it up with your final remarks.
Okay. Tommy, should I go first?
Yeah, please. Seniors first.
Okay. So I I want to say that yes, without question, this kind of SNIT and what's it called, tier 2 or whatever, and all of those kind of things, there's never been any question about this in my operations. The actual about the contract though, I have not fully, I mean, some of the people working currently do not have a formal, as in written contract to guard their employment. Some is not out of hesitation as to say I don't want to give that. Some it is an evolving thing with how you want to engage with the person. And so that is my quick answer to your question on that one. My closing remarks, I want to just say that, Fifi, am I on? Hello, Fifi.
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay. Right. My closing remarks, I want to say to everybody that running architecture is very difficult. Running an office is very difficult. I mean, and it's been increasingly difficult over the last 4 years or so. I'm not being anything political about it. Many years ago, I'd heard people saying things like, when the economy is hit, construction and architecture are one of the first areas that it gets hit first. I never understood it, but it's been very, very difficult. And I'm saying that because I remember there were times when I would do business and how I get my payments from clients was never this much of a struggle. It is very, very difficult. In the last 2 or so, 3 years, literally every month or several months in the year, it's been a struggle how to pay the salaries. I want that employees and young architects begin to understand that, as Tony said, you can only pay when you receive the payments. Our profession has been very funny in how clients relate to us and how payment we can work. It's about one of the only professions I see where your work, you can work very hard and it doesn't mean you are getting so much money. And I challenge every young architect here on this platform that you experience the same thing with your private jobs as well. Is it not so? I mean, you all your PPs, people don't pay. You struggle to get them to pay. Many of you, you do your PPs with the draftsmen or the technicians. You can't pay them. When you sit back and then you're pointing the fingers at the bosses, be careful because it's the same structure of clientele we are all having. They just don't value our work sometimes and will not pay. They pay you a bit, then to get the rest, it becomes another story. Long story. I mean, a client had owed me for several years. He comes back one day from America and says, oh, he remembers that it was about 2,000 cedis. And this is like, you've owed me for about 6 years. Do you still talk about 2,000 cedis? What happened to fluctuation and to interest and all of those things? The next thing I want to say is this. He who is scripture, it says that he who wants to be a master must first of all learn to serve. It's something I told myself many years ago, and so I served. When I was serving, there were times that I'll go to work weekends, I served. There are times that we'll stay overnight at the office working on competitions, I served. Today, I get people giving me that same service back. Many of you are truly too much in a hurry to want to be the masters when you have not served. You will not be effective masters if you do not serve. In all my years of practice, I've met many clients. I cannot, 26, 27 years, I cannot count on my here. I mean, I can count on my 2 fingers how many times I've been asked, where is your certificate? Or where is your qualification? Every time I meet clients, the question is, what have you done? What have you done? What have you done? You cannot easily answer them from PPs. A lot of the PPs, anybody who wants to do serious projects, often it's not the PPs that it brings them. You have to work under certain firms. You gain the experience, you gain the exposure. The salary may not be the best. It is not only about salary. The knowledge you gain is priceless. It will define your future. I want to make a last appeal to bosses, and I've been on that side before. Truly speaking, so many of our architects have a terrible attitude. I suffered under this from some of my bosses before, not all of them, that the ways in which we speak to our junior staff is improper, it's unacceptable. These are people who have gone through the same years of training as you have. They are no less humans than you are. Speak properly to them. You may be stressed with job, you may be stressed with some clients. It does not still give you the mandate to insult. A lot of architectural offices, the real problem is not even about how the boss doesn't pay them well. The treatment from the bosses are just horrible. Let's smile with these things. Yesterday I was telling Tony when we were preparing, it's like I said that if the lion was to eat the cubs, tomorrow what's going to happen? We really don't treat our people well. I stand with pride. I look at it. I say, if somebody left my office here to go and practice his own business, maybe yes, they have gotten to a point where their visions, their desires, and things were beyond what the office could provide for them. I blessed them to go. But God forbid, it will never be that I treated the person horribly, that I did not relate well with the person, and the person just left out of that frustration. It must cease. It must cease. It is not only about the salary, and let's also be a lot more transparent. If there are challenges, sometimes I tell my staff, Charlie, nobody has paid. Guys, I need you people to be patient small. Maybe by next week, if we get some money. They are human beings. Let's open up and talk. Also, truly speaking, many bosses sometimes don't open up about the fees and all of those things because sometimes they've had the unfortunate experience that the young staff take their businesses away and things like that. But it's an ongoing discussion. As a president, I'm happy that this has taken place. If you've handled it very beautifully, we'll continue to talk. Some of the suggestions our council will see to how to put it into practice. But really speaking, we can do something better. We ourselves as bosses, we need better remuneration. When we get paid better, I believe that we'll also start to pay all of you too a lot better. We are one, we are family. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. That's a wonderful delivery.
Mr. President, all of a sudden, the moment he said that we also need to end better, I smiled, and it's true. Let me just take it from where he left off. I have always been at the forefront of advocacy with the Ghanaians of Architects, handling a lot of these BUSAC activities. And I think that one thing that I learned from it is that we need to be able to dialogue and structure our environment. And it starts with the Ghanaians of Architects. Let's see if we can throw in a few ideas into our constitution, which would sort of, or even ethics, which would guide the way firms run. Because what we have is basically about individual architects and your roles and responsibilities. But I think that we could explore the issue of throwing some new ideas about how firms should treat junior colleagues and all of that. So we will open that dialogue, and I'm sure at a later date we can come back to that. One key thing that I've realized in the running of my practice is training, which is very key. I have a project management company that we work with, and periodically they meet early in the morning and they train their staff. You know, they train them towards making sure that they are, you know, they do the ISO standardization. They train them as to how to write reports. They train them as to how to do monitoring. They train them to do all sorts of things which we are also trying to do. With respect to training, we need to look at even courses that will enhance our performance as architects. One senior architect that I know, I don't know whether I have his permission to mention his name, but architect Tony Yeboasari, who is one of our, the PPP consultants in the country, is able to use that to leverage to get certain scale of jobs that regularly ordinary architects without that kind of training will not be able to get to. You know, we need to be able to polish ourselves up to the level of doing urban design. You know, for those of us who were doing urban design, a lot of thanks going to Professor Wellington and then Dr. Taki for, taking us through that. We always see urban planning as a very remote course, but that is where the trend of architecture is going now. We've been very fortunate to be involved with, urban design projects in Senegal, in the new city that is being created up north of Dakar, a place called Damianju. And at the time when we saw the presentation, we realized that all the architects who came in from France, from Algeria, were all looking at urban design. And a few Korean architects that I met always mentioned that that is the direction we need to take. For instance, if we take Nima and we decide that we want to redesign it, how do we even make it feasible? Architecture needs to be able to scale up to that level where we can think bigger, bigger scale. It's not just thinking big of somebody asking you to do a 3-bedroom house for 180 square meters and you're doing it 100 square meters. That is not scaling up. Scaling up is thinking bigger, such a way that we can create wholesome jobs that can carry the office for a number of years. And that leads to specialization. You need to, like some architects doing hospitals, some doing hotels and things like that, so that then we can spread more into the sub-region. Then one hard fact that I have come to is that good projects always should be good business plans. And if the investor is not going to make good money back, they wouldn't invest. And therefore, we need to get to the level where we look at feasibility of projects, look at funding, look at sources of funds, look at how projects can generate income and all of that to be able to enhance ourselves. Because if we don't get to the point where we are creating jobs for ourselves, and we always expect somebody to come and create a job for us, then it means that we will run, because we are all fishing from the same pond. So we will basically run out of luck. So we need to be able to scale up in those areas. Then finally, we need to be able to galvanize GIA and in terms of improving our advocacy skills, and then learn to walk in the corridors of power. That is where the jobs come from. We are fortunate that now we have 2 members of parliament, in the name of architect Zelatete and then architect Kwame Abuja. We need to be able to understand how these politicians decide on projects, so that we can influence them at the top before it trickles down to us. We need to do a different kind of architecture. We need to be able to speak a different kind of language. We need to be able to learn different kind of vocabulary to be able to do this. With that, then we know that we are going to be able to earn more as principals, and then also be able to pay our employers better. But all in all, I have enjoyed this. I honestly felt that it was going to be a bombardment from the young ones to the old ones, because honestly, 2002, if anybody had called me to engage my principal architects, it would have been fireworks. But I think we will learn from whatever discussions where we are, and then let's improve and make our offices better. And thank you very much for the opportunity, Ghana Institute of Architects and the Council. And thank you very much, Fifi, for nicely hosting this. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our resource persons and our audience. Clearly, there's a need for more architectural dialogues so we can demystify all the issues that bother us privately in our practices. Time is far spent and we have to bring the program to a close, but it will not be fair to do that without acknowledging those of our colleagues who have fallen within this period. We have architect Abankwa and architect Yao Afuakwa. I think it will be in order to have a minute silence for these 2 prominent fallen heroes of ours. May their souls rest in peace. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
We'll follow up with feedback and further structure how the other architectural conversations will go. Thank you very much.
For over 20 years, Chemo has gone the extra mile to beautify homes across Ghana. We offer a wide variety of world-class bathrooms, tiles, kitchens, and interior finishing, giving customers the peace of mind they need to relax and create their dream spaces. We assure you of unbeatable offers, expert advice, and premium customer care. Locate our showroom on the Spintex Road, close to Manette Junction, or call 0900 200 000. Follow us on social media at Chemo Home. Chemo, relax, dream, create.